Alright, we are recording for chapter 1 of Wrath of Khan in this. Um, I'm really liking this first chapter. I hope that the rest of the chapters, of which it goes to chapter 9, then there's an epilogue. I hope that they all line up with this, and also, if it is the case that Vonda there is the one who wrote all of them, how that first page where it listed the different information for who wrote what, it seemed a little unclear to me because some of it did seem like may have been written by somebody else. Excuse me. There's also that may have been referencing like the screenplay for the movies, but in any case, I really, really like how chapter 1 was written. So yes, I am very much looking forward to continuing in the book and hopefully seeing more of this writing that I'm finding very, very satisfying. And hopefully we'll continue into the other two books as well. But that will depend on if it is Vonda who's actually written them. Okay. So this, if you know the movie, this basically goes from Kirk opening up, having the front of the simulation opened up, so he can address the people there, to him receiving the book and walking away from Spock at the end, which there's a lot more that happens in the book, in the novelization than the movie. Some of that is just, well, I mean, yeah, you can spend more time in a book than a movie. Yes, I've mentioned that many times before. Some of it is, I almost wish that some of this were actually how we're in the movie. It is really, really well done. Very well written. But I mean, yeah, okay, so he comes in, and it's a little different. Sitting in front of the view screen, Admiral James T. Cook shook his head. He laughed softly, but more at memories than at what he had observed. All right, he said, open it up. My memory for Wrath of Khan, when we are finally introduced to him, he is not in a humorous mood. That's more like, yeah, it's done. Let's get this over with. Than that. But you know, I mean, the book though can have some more fun here, and indeed it does, because I think you do kind of see it. It's just downplayed. It's not as obvious. The original bridge crew is kind of laughing as they're getting up, and most of the trainees leave. I think it did say to go to the debriefing. The debriefing room, Savick is still there. We get a lot more background on her, by the way, a lot more. Which it doesn't quite answer the questions I brought up before about how Balance of Terror technically should preclude her existence, but as I also said, the original series was made as a television series, whereas these movies and then the subsequent series in the 90s were made to be Star Trek movies and Star Trek television shows, so greater adherence to continuity. And potentially that also mean, yeah, we're changing the old continuity so that we can maintain it better going forward. But anyhow, so she's still there. Spock, McCoy, Uhura, and Sulu are also there. And McCoy is reclined on the ground just like he is in the movie. In like the whole "what did you think of my performance" thing, he doesn't actually have that line, but we do still get Kirk saying, "Physician, heal thyself." This leads a little bit, where Sulu gets in on this. "It's too bad you're not a cook," Sulu said to the Admiral. "A cook? Why a cook? You could make fried ham," Sulu said, deadpan. So, yeah, he goes on. Kirk started to laugh. "Fried ham?" Dr. McCoy exclaimed. "I'll have you know I was the best Prince Charming in second grade. And as a side dish," Sulu said in the tones of an obsequious waiter, "perhaps a little sautéed scenery. When it's cooked, it's much easier to chew." In uncanny imitation of Dr. McCoy, he cried, "Mr. Sulu, Mr. Sulu, oh God, Spock, he's dead." And it's just like, I don't recall there being any suggestion of DeForest Kelley overacting, but the fried ham thing, I can believe that was poking fun at Shatner. Which, to be fair with Shatner, I feel that a good way to describe him, especially when watching through the original series. He is a very talented actor. He's a very good actor, but he has lousy instinct, such that he is best when you have a director that can control him, explicitly or implicitly. So, for example, there's actually a story that's mentioned in the in one of the commentaries, I think it is, for Wrath of Khan, that when at the end of the first encounter with Khan, where he's about to use the prefix code to take control of the Reliant and then open fire on them. In the movie, he kept wanting to put an emphasis on "here it comes," just like, basically tipping Khan off. The director was like, "No, Shatner, Bill, we can't have you do that. We need it completely flat because we don't want Khan being tipped off." And Shatner he kept doing it, either intentionally or accidentally, believing he knew it best, or he just couldn't help it. It was something like 20 takes they had to do, because at that point, Shatner was just so tired, he couldn't put the little emphasis on there. And so that's the take used in the movie. And it's like, but that's kind of what I mean. Either intentionally or not, he was not making the right call there, because Khan, for two reasons. One, Khan could pick up on that. Khan's not stupid. He's insane at this point, but he's not stupid. He would be like, "Why'd you say it that way?" I mean, he might still not be able to do anything, but he needs to be surprised by not knowing what's coming. The second is, Kirk also should be in sufficient control to not tip his hand. So it is the director was right there. Shatner wasn't. Fortunately, he managed to get Shatner there, but I could still see it being fried ham, like you, Shatner. And legitimately, he is a good actor, okay? If you see him in other things, and also just season 3, it comes out more in the original series that he can go over the top. But season 1, season 2, he's got some very good work there. But he's done plenty of other movies as well, where when well controlled, he's a very good actor. Not necessarily one of the greats, but very, very good. They're not. One of the movies he did was Judgment at Nuremberg. So he's getting to act with Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy would be one of the greats. Shatner would not be. He does a great job, don't get me wrong, but Spencer Tracy's one of the greats. And that also had Burt Lancaster, who would also be one of the greats. I don't quite remember. Wait, was that Dietrich? I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be distracting myself like this. Hang on. Because I have Judgment in Nuremberg. I'll just pull it up on the phone and see the cast list. It is a good movie. I do recommend it. Very much. Movies. Judgment in Nuremberg. Is that Dietrich? It is. Okay, it is Dietrich. She probably can also be considered one of the greats. I don't know. What I do just want to mention, and I know it's quite an aside, Maximilian Schell, well, is one of the actors in there, and it's an interesting bit of history with him in that movie. Because he was in the original stage play, and at first when they wanted to make the movie, some of the people in charge, I don't remember if it may have been the director with the producer, were thinking, yeah, who do we want there, yeah. But then they saw the performance that he gave in the play, and it's like, we want him, and they got him, and he did a fantastic job. I mean, it truly is, you are not going to find somebody better in that role than him. He was perfect for his role. Yeah, I'm not sure who else I would necessarily want to say. I mean, Judy Garland, she was definitely a star. I'm not sure if I would count her as one of the greats, though. I would need to then go through more of her history. Werner Klemper was in it, which he was very good. He would not be among one of the greats, and it's just there's That's just how it is. I mean, you can be very good, but not necessarily one of the greats. Anyway, yeah. Let me just check in here. Okay, so one thing very curious. Yeah, I got two highlights here. I'll just read them together, skipping the bit in between. It's all basically one conversation. The simulation is extremely effective, Savick said. It's meant to be. Kirk noticed, though, that she appeared as self-possessed and collected now as when she had entered the simulator, unlike most of the other trainees who came out sweating and unkempt. But I question its realism. You think it's an effective simulation and you think it's unrealistic? Kirk asked. Yes, sir. I mean, and there's an explanation. They don't get into that, but the circumstances allow no possibility of success. What I skipped over was her talking about what the circumstances were. Lieutenant Savick, do you think no one who worked on the simulation, no one who ever took it before, ever noticed that the odds couldn't be beaten? I find this very curious. I just want to stem the highlight. Oh, come on, don't do that. Okay, it's acting a little weird. She started to reply, stopped, and frowned. No, Admiral, she said so slowly. I admit I had not considered that possibility. You were given a no-win situation. That's something any commander may have to face at any time. I don't like this. I will admit. I think that only explaining it much later in the Genesis Cave, I think that's far more appropriate, and not just because of a bias towards the movie, because I'm far more familiar with the movie. No, I think that the nature of a no-win scenario is you do not know when you will be in it. So unless this is she is not going to be allowed to repeat the test, and actually it is stated a little later that their simulation testing is completed, so there won't be another attempt. But to acknowledge it is a no-win scenario is... You cannot do that until it is after the fact. And it's also, I think I had mentioned it when the previous things... I don't remember, because sometimes I just work things through in my head. You need to shuffle. Yeah, I think I did talk about this, that, basically a coin flip. Who's going to have the Kobayashi Maru? That's the no-win scenario. Who's going to have it where it can be completed? Like that is exactly what you want. So to acknowledge it with her is inappropriate. If that is one assigned to her, unless it is, yeah, you're not going to be allowed to do this again. But it is interesting because she doesn't... I'm trying to think of how best to put it. She has a certain strong-headedness, let's say. I don't want to say stubborn. Excuse me. Strong-headed is the best way to put it, because that can still be a positive trait. Stubbornness is much more so across the line into a negative trait. She, I do not doubt, is one that can cross that line at times and become stubborn. But we do get explanation for why she is wired the way she is, and it's a good reason. And would make her... Yeah, I think that's a decent way to put it. She is adversarial to the concept of a no-win scenario. Kirk is competitive with it. Kirk rejects the idea that there's a no-win scenario, and so he will always try to find a way to win. Whatever it is, he will find a solution. He will strive for that. He will not give up. And he is sufficiently skilled, sufficiently talented that he typically can. She, however, what I mean by adversarial is she so thoroughly rejects it that it's not necessarily in her mind to be like him and just try to find a different solution. It would be more of a, no, this is wrong. So it's a different kind of aggression towards it, a different way to attack it. And that is one that would be a weakness for her, ultimately. And I will also mention that what I skipped over, the specific circumstances, was she was like, no, the Klingons would never send 10 ships after a single Starfleet vessel. So that's how the test, though effective, is unrealistic. Because it's like, this would never happen. So why should I worry about this? Like, well, it's a no-win scenario. Yeah, okay, maybe we didn't need to push it to that degree, but that's not the point. The point is you were not going to win, and we needed to figure out what your response would be. And you need to figure it out, too. So, and I guess in a way it would also be making, well, no, actually making it where it's 10 would be worse with her, because that's so strongly, as I said, her adversarial view, from what I've read thus far, would make it where she would have to still try to punch through the 10 if she felt punching it is the strategy. Whereas Kirk, if he were faced with 10, would become with so many other different strategies to try. So, yeah. Alright, I think that's later. Okay, we also do get the whole he's feeling old. The hints of that are in here, just as they are in the movie. There's more of them because the chapter is longer. Sorry, I rubbed my eye and then it was like it left somehow some of the film that's normally on your eye got a little wonky there. That or there's just dirt on the lens. So, most people heading towards the briefing room. Kirk finally leaves his simulation. Spots Spock. Came face to face with Spock, who is leaning against the wall with his arms folded. I find that an odd description. Just, I don't see Vulcans leaning. I'm sorry, but it's like if they are waiting for something, I just see. I mean, maybe arms folded. I think more so he would have them like down and like clasped like that or something, like that, either in front or behind, but standing, not just leaning. But anyway, we do get the "Didn't you die?" Kirk asked line, which he thought for an instant that Spock was going to smile, but Spock recovered himself in time. Do you want to know your cadet's efficiency rating, or are you just loitering? Vulcans are not renowned for their ability to loiter, Spock said, or for their ability to admit terrible character flaws such as they're curious. Indeed, Admiral. If it will raise your opinion of my character, I suppose I must admit to some curiosity. I like this. This is also part of the reason why I'm really enjoying this chapter, why I really enjoyed it, is the banter between these two. It is pretty good, because it is such a good familiarity with them that even though, like Kirk kind of just made an interesting jab at Spock with the whole, you can't admit character flaws like curiosity. It's like, well, if it'll make you feel better, I will admit I am curious. It's like, okay, I mean, it's just, you wouldn't always expect Spock to do that. Spock's character in the original series definitely kind of fluctuates, so you would not expect motion picture, post-Kolinar, pre-V'ger mind meld thing, you would not expect that Spock to at all appreciate that comment. But instead, it's like, yeah, going with it. Very good. I really like that. Okay. They're talking a little bit about it, and it is a little bit of this. At least Kirk, I think, maybe it's also Spock. I don't quite remember. Don't feel like reading. There's kind of circling an issue, but anyway, just as far as what happened with the test. And this is when Spock mentions the whole. Well, it's usual. It's common that Kobayashi wreaks havoc with the simulator. But you yourself took the test 3 times. Spock is saying. No, Kirk said with mock horror. Did I? Indeed, and with a resolution that was, to put it politely, unique. It was unique when I did it, Kirk said, but I think a number of people have tried it since. Without success, you should add. It was a solution that would not have occurred to a Vulcan. Oh, no. Which, I think that's a little curious. I mean, I guess it would make sense that Vulcan logic would attach them to the idea of they must accept the situation as it is. They are not allowed to try to modify the situation, which is what Kirk did to the test. We know that based, having seen the movie so many times and loving the movie so many times. It's a good movie. So, yeah, I mean, I do like that. This little thing there. But it's also, how come he got to do it 3 times? Saavik is presumably only being allowed once. There's no reference to her getting to have tried it previously, prior to this chapter. But I do like the whole, it's saying that others have tried and none have succeeded, which, in my opinion, makes a lot of sense. I will admit, as much as, well, this was many, many years ago now. Oh, so many years ago. Ow, that just hurt my brain a little bit. I actually know people younger than this story of mine. I did once think through a fan fiction story for Star Trek. I actually did write. I have no idea what that file might be. I did write a little bit for it. Don't have it. Let's just go with I don't have it anymore, except for what I remember. I mean, there's a good chance the file does not exist anymore. But in any case, I did think about the idea of having other people having done it, but would be very, very rare. And what did I think out for that? It was something like, you did have some Vulcans, because like each time it was modified, they figured out how it was modified and then patched that so it couldn't be done again. And I think I actually did have that one of the times it was a Vulcan, that they figured out the logic of it. But another time, it was somebody figured out how to confuse the system, because they patched it so many times trying to solve different errors. It's like, okay, so so instead of attacking it this way, we're just gonna do it like this way, and thinking it's gonna be trying to constantly correct for what it thinks is attempts to break it, and that itself will break it. It's like, yeah, that I do remember that being one of the ideas. But it's still, even for me, it was like, and this would be like hundreds of years into the future from this point, and it's like, yeah, there was still only like 3 or 4 times, like it being very, very rare, because every time somebody would beat it, it's like, all right, there's a bug, we have to fix it. All right, so now we get to the actual debriefing room, which has, I assume it's something like a college classroom with there being levels to it. So that kind of stadium kind of layout. All the cadets are there along with Saavik. Saavik is described as a lieutenant, so I'm not sure if that means she's a cadet. But in any case, Spock is in the back, Kirk is up front, and he's bored with this. He doesn't want to do this. He would have been tempted, except that there are rules and regulations, to just go and say, "Sup, we're done," and then just leave. I'm just like, nah, I don't want to do this. But he has to, and the process involves going from lowest rank to highest rank, asking them what they believe happened, what they would try to do different. And it mentions some that are interesting. Some like, I just follow the regulations and not enter the neutral zone. It's like, okay, so you would abandon that ship to its fate, the Kobayashi Maru to its fate. Others being like, I would send in a shuttlecraft to determine if it is there or if it is a trap, is an illusion. And these different things like that, which presumably had been tried by other commanders being tested. Which, let me just see, how would I, if it were, no, I'm just not going to cross the neutral zone. It's like, okay, that's fair. We'll give you another test then, where now you are in a situation, that excuse is gone, and we're going to make sure it's a no-win scenario. So it's like that, as far as that testing goes, it's fine. Can't handle that. The sending in a shuttlecraft, that would be easy. It's just you have it where, well, no, the ship is there. And so now the Kobayashi Maru is there, so now the starship does have to enter, and same thing happens. So it's... But anyway, getting to Saavik, he's still were I confronted with the same events, I would react in the same manner. The details might be different. I see no point to increasing your boredom with trivia. Kirk felt embarrassed to have shown his disinterest so clearly. Yeah, he reacted rather harshly. You do the same thing despite knowing it would mean the destruction of your ship and crew, and it does then get into an interesting debate, but it is still like, he really starts thinking better of her, more highly of her, from this, but it's also like, didn't realize they knew I was bored. It's kind of funny. But it ultimately leads to, well, she does explain that I know that it might mean the destruction of my ship and crew. This is what I mean by the adversarial aspects. Like, she's rejecting the concept that it might be there. Not that she did anything wrong, but that the situation itself is so unreal that it's irrelevant. Kirk, maybe not at the time was a cadet, but certainly did learn that no, there are no-win scenarios, but that doesn't mean you have to surrender to them being no-win scenarios. He will try to outcompete and then be like, oh, turns out it wasn't no-win. She is just rejecting their existence, but not taking that into herself as that means I need to find ways to make a no-win scenario winnable. But anyway, Lieutenant, are you familiar with Rickover paradoxes, which I am not, personally. Neither is she. And I did not look it up. But basically what he did, he then gives this description. You're on a sailing ship, an ocean-going vessel, it sinks. You find yourself in a life raft with one other person. The life raft is damaged. It might support one person, but not two. How would you go about persuading the other person to let you have the raft? I would not, she said. No? Why? For one thing, I am an excellent swimmer. When the students started giggling, but that stopped after the neighbor elbowed them. And it's like, good. I mean, that would not be appropriate. I mean, it is kind of funny, but it's like, this is not a time for anyone to laugh. Oh yeah, this was also a little fun. The water is crowded with extremely carnivorous sharks. Sharks, Admiral? Terran, Spock said from the back of the room. Order Seliki. Just identifying what the species is. Right. And they are very, very hungry, Kirk adds. It's like, I could believe that just being Kirk doesn't know what he just said. The point is that there's something that it's going to eat you, woman. What's your reaction? My answer is the same. Kirk then goes further with basically, well, what if this other person is a drain on society, you might say, whereas you, a great deal has been invested into, trying to set it up, or rather, another way to put it, might be a better way to put it, bait her into, or bait anyone into thinking you are more valuable than that person. So how do you try to get the raft for yourself? She challenges that. Is that what you believe, Admiral? I'm not being rated, Lieutenant. You are. I've asked you a serious question, and you've replied with what could be considered appalling false modesty. What her response to this kind of helps explain what that false modesty is. Savick stood up angrily. You asked me if I should... Hang on. Let me... I'm trying to get this highlight to be a little easier to read. There we go. You asked me if I should not preserve myself so I can carry out my responsibilities. Then I ask you, what are my responsibilities? By the criteria you have named, my responsibilities are to preserve myself so I can carry out my responsibilities. This is a circular and self-justifying argument. That would also be known as a tautological argument, by the way. Pretty sure I'm using that word right. Anyway, it is immoral in the extreme. A just society, and if I'm not mistaken, the Federation considers itself to be just, employs a military for one reason alone, to protect its civilians. If we decide to judge that some civilians are worth protecting and some are not, if we decide we are too important to be risked, then we destroy our own purpose. We cease to be the servants of our society. We become its tyrants. I really liked this response. And it is, she was basically saying, you know, the false modesty was... Yeah, that basically she would never ask somebody to sacrifice their life for her. And then she makes that statement that is very accurate, very appropriate. And by the way, I'll just also add this, because I'm a little biased here, I do agree. That one reason why I will always have respect for members of the military, for firefighters, for police officers, and probably a number of other positions that I'm just not thinking of. Because a certain aspect of them, certainly police and firefighters, a certain aspect to those roles, to, in many cases, these vocations, is them not coming home alive, them dying, but somebody else living. A civilian living. That to them is doing a good job. Like, they are there such that their death, but somebody else's survival, is a good job, but that's an achievement, versus their survival, but that civilian dies, is a failure. I will always respect people that is their role. Granted, there are some of those people that are bad examples. That's a separate point. I'm still going to have a base level of respect because that's huge. And that's essentially what she's arguing there as well. That's why I feel, I'm just explaining, I might be biased towards this because I understand this point. That she is in a role. Her responsibility is to save other people's lives. If her death helps them live, she will gladly do it because that is the responsibility she's taken on. And I respect her for that. And I respect anyone like that as well. So, this does get brought up later. Okay. I just want to check. Okay, and she, by the way, is not... Kirk does respect her. Let me be clear on this. He has no problems with her response. In fact, it even is a point is even made that, well, that she made an elegant defense, but also that he then made a statement that she felt was ambiguous, and so she's not really sure how to take it, but then just decides, I'm going to take it as a compliment. Thank you, sir, and sits down. But moving on, we start to get more information about her, and it is quite interesting and helps explain her feeling there, and potentially also her adversary. She has a chip on her shoulder, and why? Why does she have that? There was a reference earlier about her being more volatile than normal Vulcan. She's reasonably, under the circumstances, this is Spock talking, under the circumstances, she showed admirable restraint. So yeah, she is reasonably, period. Under the circumstances, she showed admirable restraint. Sorry, I was reading that wrong. The one thing Spock did not expect of Lieutenant Savick was self-control as complete as his own. He believed that only a vanishingly small difference existed between humans and Romulans when it came to the ability to indulge in emotional outbursts. But Spock had had the benefit of growing up among Vulcans. He had learned self-control early. Savick had spent the first 10 years of her life fighting to survive in the most brutal underclass of a Romulan colony world. It's like, okay, this is interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's just we are starting to get background on her. Also, his view of the Romulans, which I'm not sure I necessarily would agree with him that the Romulans and humans are very similar in how readily they can approach an emotional outburst, but still, it's like it is also because I need to not just be talking about what's in the chapter, but actually talking about this. I do like how this is written, and we do get more information on her. Excuse me. Colony was a failure, and so the Romulans abandoned it, but they didn't take everyone with them. The official Romulan position was that Vulcans and Romulans could not interbreed without technological intervention. Therefore, the abandoned children could not exist. So they abandoned all the half-breed children, and they also abandoned the elderly, the crippled, the disturbed. I put in my notes was the infirmed, physically or mentally, along with these children. So she has already felt being under tyranny. And by the way, there was also mention about, I think it was there. Hang on. At one point, it point was also made. Oh, yeah, here it is. The Romulan military, which was indistinguishable from the Romulan government, made the decision to abandon it. So basically, she knows very well she grew up partly under and was abandoned by a tyrannical government. So that would explain part of the reason she is so obsessive with that feeling, with that sense of her responsibilities, that she would never abandon, certainly not children, but potentially even those the infirm. There's like, no, we're taking them, because she never wants to be abandoned like that either. She considers it a great wrong. But there is also this that is somewhat interesting. The reality was that the evolution of Romulans and Vulcans had diverged only a few thousand years before the present. There's one thing about, well, a couple things about that I'm curious about. The genetic differences were utterly trivial, but a few thousand years of cultural divergence formed a chasm that appeared unbridgeable. I don't think I would say that the... Well, no, I mean, I guess it... Well, when it comes to reproduction, yes, utterly trivial. Okay, I have to agree with that. Because what do they figure that the American Indian, that the separation between them and the rest of the world occurred, what, 10, 15,000 years ago? And this was several thousand years ago. A few thousand years ago. So, yes, there were various, what was it, phenotypic? Is that what it's called? There were various visible features that would be different between them and others. Not in, just what we call races, not to the point of being different species, though, certainly not. Interbreeding was still, well, it's not interbreeding because it's the same species, but reproduction with them was still completely possible. But yes, you would typically see different melanin level with them, also different bone structures, different heights and weights, because those are also something that do vary with different peoples, depending on various factors. So, yeah, but So yeah, in that regard, utterly trivial, but you put an American Indian against somebody of another race, an example of another race, such as Northern European, Southern European, so more Mediterranean, North African, which again is Mediterranean, but there can be some subtle differences. Sub-Saharan African, Middle Eastern, Hindi, Oriental, and even then there's differences within, like Chinese, Japanese, Korean. There are differences there that can be observed. And probably also in Southeast Asia as well, some differences that I'm not going to be able to pick up on. I don't know those cues. But it's like, yeah, there would be significant differences there. And I guess that those are not utterly trivial. For the purposes of what's being talked about here, though, yeah, okay. The other thing is, I just find it interesting. So a few thousand years ago, the original Vulcan species figured out space travel sufficiently for for a group to leave and become the Romulans. Okay, that I just find that a little interesting. I'm trying to remember if there was any other point that reminded me of that I wanted to mention. I don't think so. Anyway, so the next thing they have here. Okay. She had declined her right to an antigen scan, which would have identified her Vulcan parent. This was a highly honorable action, but it meant that she had no family. That, in fact, she did not even know which of her parents was Vulcan and which Romulan. No Vulcan family had offered to claim her, so presumably then the colony, after being abandoned by the Romulans, the Federation found and recovered these people, including her. Well, they may have just recognized that all the children were only left there because they were half Romulan, half Vulcan. But that she decided, nope, she was abandoned. She doesn't want to connect with people who abandoned her. But I did put in my notes, a Vulcan orphan seems illogical to me. That I would think a Vulcan would always recognize, no, we must adopt. Like, even if it's not a member of their family, we must adopt them because these struggles with our emotions, they must learn how to handle. Therefore, there must be a family to assist with this. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, one thing that would kind of work with how Balance of Terror would be still coherent with this, still aligned with this, would be if it was that the Romulans had, in which case it was likely a Romulan father and a Vulcan mother, had taken Vulcan prisoners and had raped some of them and produced her via that. Because then that would explain, well, not only the mixing, but that potentially the mother was killed or just moved along in such a way that she would be lost and there would not be a Vulcan record of a family for her. So, for Sapp County. So, yeah, don't know. But it is interesting. It will also be interesting to see how some of this goes. Yeah, and actually the next highlight. Perhaps someday, this is Spock musing on her, perhaps someday she would prove herself to herself and be free of the last shackles binding her to her past. So he's basically thinking about how she wants so much to escape from the past, so much to prove herself, she has a chip on her shoulder, that she strives to prove herself to people that don't know everything she's accomplished and don't understand it either. I guess one way to put it is for somebody with her history, with her past, to even be in Starfleet, to achieve any officer rank, is itself, that's impressive. So, yeah, but a lot of people around her might just be like, well, we're in Starfleet together. I mean, it's like, yeah, cool. I was like, not thinking about it more than that. I could see that as being one example, but yeah, it's definitely neat. And I'm very much looking forward to how she continues. I'm really, I know. Prologue in Chapter 1, that's all I've done so far. I'm really enjoying how this is going. I'm really hoping that this continues to be as enjoyable throughout this book, hopefully into the next one for Search for Spock and then Voyage Home after. Okay. So now we get after the debriefing when Spock and Kirk are talking, and it's the whole, happy birthday kind of thing, right? So Spock has given him the gift. Well, yeah, it was my birth. How did you know it was my birthday? The date is not difficult to ascertain. I mean, why? No, never mind. Another silly question. Thank you, Spock. Okay. Perhaps you should open it before you thank me. It may not strike your fancy. Very Vulcan answer there. I mean, it's like, this is what this kind of banter, this kind of familiarity between them, it's great. And it makes perfect sense. That a Vulcan would be like, well, a gift, if it is, it's like, it should be something the person will value, not just the thought that counts, which is what's coming up. It should be that. So it's like, don't thank me until you know it's something you want. I'm sure it may not strike your fancy. I'm sure it will. But you know what they say, it's the thought that counts. He slid his fingers beneath the outside edge of the elegantly folded paper. I have indeed heard it saying, and I have always wanted to ask, Spock said with honest curiosity. If it is the thought that counts, why do humans bother with the gift? I got an answer for that. Other than Kirk's here. Jim laughed. There's no good answer to that. I guess it's just an example of the distance between our ideals and reality. No, it's because the act still matters. Because, I was thinking about you, but it wasn't enough for me to do anything about it. It's like that's not really helpful. That's not really meaningful. But to actually go through the act, that means that the person is of enough value to spend at minimum the time to consider them. At minimum that. But it's also potentially to spend the money on it as well. To say, hey, I think you will value that. Hey, I value you. I think you will value this. Let me give this to you. It can also be you give them something where you yourself value it. Say, I value this. I believe you will as well, so I'm sharing it with you. There's also that notion there. But no, I mean, it's fundamentally, yes, it is the thought that counts as well. Because they were thinking about you, but the action of the gift as well is also significant because it is, I don't want to say proof, because that's not quite where I want to be with this. It's, how did I put it earlier? I'm sorry, I'm a little tired. About the whole, it is showing that you value them. Because I guess a way to put it is this. Aggravated crimes. What that actually means, if it's aggravated, is that it was premeditated. It seems odd because that's not really how aggravated is used in common English, but in legal English it is. Anyway, premeditation can occur in a single instant. Well, that premeditation is a thought. So, and it can be very difficult to prove. But if you were to, say, be defending yourself against some attack, but you had that thought of, I want to actually hurt this person. Not I want to protect myself, but no, I want to cause harm to this person, or I even want to kill this person. That then would push into premeditated assault, well, premeditated battery, or even premeditated murder, technically. I mean, yes, there's still the argument of justification because of self-defense, but it's still that singular thought there can be enough. And yeah, it's like you can, it takes only an instant for that. Well, that instant is the thought that counts, but it still is the action then that ultimately matters. In that situation, it could even be I thought about it, but I chose not to do it. It's like, I thought about committing crime, but then I chose not to. It's like, well, then the action there, again, it matters. The thought isn't. So, yes, the thought that counts is legitimate and does need to be considered with all gifts, including those that are good gifts, things you want, that the thought still does matter there. But it's still the action of gift giving should not be diminished. And I would think that I can see a Vulcan not understanding that initially, but that an explanation of, because it is the action, that it shows that the consideration, that it was more than just a thought to you, that I think a Vulcan would understand. Anyway. Parcel was wrapped in paper only with no adhesive or ties. And I really like this. That's why I highlighted it. Excuse me. After purchasing the gift, Spock had passed a small booth at which an elderly woman created simple, striking packages with nothing but folded paper. Fascinated by the geometry and topology of what she was doing, Spock watched for some time and then had her wrap Jim's birthday present. At a touch, the wrapping fanned away untorn. It's like, in a way, that's actually also it. Because to Spock's mind, it's illogical to wrap the gift. That would be a waste of resources and waste of time, right? But he still chose to. But why? Because he was fascinated by the geometry and topology of what she was doing. He saw there was something interesting here, something of value here, so he wanted that to be part of it as well. Because he saw this value here and it's like, oh, my friend will appreciate this as well. It's no longer just a gifts are supposed to be wrapped kind of thing. Because he could just wrap it any other way. But this was special. This was something he thought had value. And so he went, so that he does understand it. He just doesn't necessarily have it connected together. That's the why more than the thought is present. Then we have Jim saw what was inside and sat down heavily. Perhaps it is the thought that counts? Spock said, no, Spock, good Lord, it's beautiful. Because this is, seeing the book, which is a copy of Tale of Two Cities. I only recently became aware of your fondness for antiques, Spock said. It was a liking he had begun to believe he understood in an odd way. Once he paid attention to it. Well, in an odd way, once he paid attention to it. The book, for example, combined the flaws and perfections of something handmade. It was curiously satisfying. I really do like this. I feel we are getting a very good description of Spock's mind, of Spock's personality here. That while, yes, it is a Vulcan mind with great logic to it, there is still that humanity there, both because he's half human and also because he has been around humans for so much of his life. And that he feels a kinship with Kirk specifically, that they are brothers, they are that close. And so he he is gaining a sense of that, and I really, really like how this is being described. But also, I do want to just say, and this can be where I ended, where I need to end it. Wow, this has been going on for a while. I only recently became aware of your fondness for antiques. I don't think it is ever mentioned previously, like in the original series, that Kirk likes antiques. So that could be sort of a little bit, yeah, we're pushing this in now that you just no one ever noticed it before. I mean, it's not like it's not retcon. It isn't, because it's not doing anything that is contradicting anything prior. It's just adding something to Kirk's character that is very reasonable to be there. In fact, it's something that could even have developed later in his life. I mean, it's. I have definitely, in probably the past 1-2 years, been a lot more aggressive in getting physical media. That is, a lot of it is right there. I mean, it's like I've always had a certain enjoyment, certainly of the movies and television that I've been putting into my collection. But I've been a bit more aggressive of it of late. And it's like, because yes, sometimes things do build up, and it's like, oh yeah, these are specific things I do value and I want. So that any may not have held that feeling before, but yeah, so definitely been enjoying this. Okay, just quickly looking at chapter 2, we got Chekhov talking, so we are going to be on the Reliance, so in theory, we will be meeting Khan in the next chapter, so that'll be fun. Alright. See you next time.